course, it's a very long time now since I wrote very much poetry, but this one I rather liked, The Hidden Battlefield. Not in the gilded panoply of war the greatest deeds are done, nor in the glare of public favour grows the tree that bore the laurel for the wreaths the immortals wear. The victor in his triumph, midst applause of multitudes, may know himself within to be a traitor to some sacred cause, and vile as those men brand with basest sin. But in the soul a battlefield is found, a lonely battlefield that no man sees. There victory with no mortal gold is crowned, and earns no praises, and no pageantries. Yet on that hidden field man wins a prize that shall not perish when earth's glory dies.
Hello again, and this evening the distinguished writer and historian Dr. Noêlle Davies talks about her life and times. Born at Bushy Park near Mount Talbot in County Roscommon, she studied at the old French school in Bray, spent a number of years in the newly established International College in Elsinore in Denmark, studying, among other things, the world-famous Danish folk school system, and where she also met her future husband, Di Davies, who was to involve her deeply in later years in the Welsh nationalist movement. Dr. Davies has written extensively on both educational matters and nationalism, and has published a critically acclaimed volume of poetry. She has also compiled a fascinating history of her own family, the Frenches of Bushy Park and Monivea in County Galway, which she has entitled Letters to My Godchild. And it's at Bushy Park, the splendid old West Roscommon manor house, that she begins her story.
Well, the most happy part of it all, I think, was just my sister and myself tearing about the farm and enjoying ourselves and feeding the hens and doing all those sort of things, the children do. And that was a very pleasant kind of a life, really. And, well, we went on like that. I mean, stayed here and all that until it would have been about 1912, I suppose. Yes, 1912 it would have been, I think, when we went off to school. And we went to the French school, Bray, which you may never have heard of, but it was a very famous establishment of its own kind. There was an enormous tall lady in it, Miss Riley, and she was about a mile high, and very severe if you did anything that didn't please her, and you had to play the piano for her. And when you were playing the piano, if she didn't like the way you did it, she'd come and give you an awful wallop over your fingers with her fingers, which were very hard and very long and very knobby, not a bit comfortable. So it was rather a hard life, and we were always rather glad when it wasn't Miss Riley we were going to for our music, because we suffered a good deal with those fingers. So, well, I was there for about 4 years, I think. It must have been about 4 years. And after that, what on earth did I do then? Oh, of course, I went to Denmark. And the way that happened was that I had been going through college, of course, and when I finished there, I thought that perhaps I ought to get away somewhere, to some place that I hadn't been, and to learn something about some other place. So at that time, I wrote to somebody or other in London, I think it was, to inquire about the possibility of finding some place overseas, not too far overseas either. And he told me that there was newly opened in Elsinore a college, the International People's College, and that they thought it would be a very good idea for me to go there. So off I hopped and landed myself into Denmark, and went to, and it was midwinter, I think, or very near it anyhow. It was the end of the winter, and lots of snow every place, and everybody talking Danish, of course, and I only knowing a few words, which made things a bit awkward. And there were a couple of rather nice poor old Danes that tried to talk to me, and I tried to talk to them. I don't think either of us made much of a fist of it, but never mind, we did our best. And then I landed up in Elsinore, of course, and the first thing I saw there when I got out of the train was that the whole of the Sound was covered with ice, which wasn't very encouraging, but it could have been worse. So then I went off. I was met, of course, by Dr. Manica, who had started this school, the International People's College in Elsinore. So I went off to stay there then, and I was there for quite a long time. And it was very, very cold at the beginning time, I remember, because there was an awful lot of ice on the Sound. And even when I was walking about round about the countryside, the lanes and things, everything was sort of frozen up and very, very chilly and everything. But it was nice and warm in the college itself, thank goodness we were kept warm enough there, so we weren't too bad.
But what kind of school was this People's College?
Well, this People's College was something that this Dr. Manica, he's dead now, poor man, but he was a great man. He started it. He thought he wanted to have some kind of a school that would be a kind of an international school, that it wouldn't be only for one particular country, but for lots of different countries. And he did have quite a lot of people from different countries. He had Danes, of course, plenty of Danes, and he had Swedes, and I think he had some Germans. Yes, he had some Germans. He had quite a good number of young people gathered there, and they used to have, of course, classes, and all that sort of thing, and then going for excursions out in the country and all that kind of thing. It was a very happy sort of a time, and easygoing and happy-go-lucky, and we all enjoyed it.
Well, it was while you were in Denmark then that you became particularly interested in the folk school concept, the
Yes.
idea which had been pioneered by the Danes perhaps 100 years earlier.
Yes, by Grundtvig, of course, the very famous Danish educator. Yes. Oh, yes, that's quite true.
Now, what attracted you to the folk schools, and what importance did you see them having?
Well, it seemed to be a very good a way of sort of teaching young people, I thought. It wasn't going to be... they didn't have so much very academic things, but they had a more general kind of wide interests, as far as I could see. But of course, it was all very new to me, and it was very strange when I arrived first, and I thought the queerest thing ever I saw was to see the whole of the Sound covered with ice.
You could almost have walked across to Sweden if you had wanted to.
If I'd had some magic kind of shoes, I could have. But I didn't. But it was very interesting being there, because there were people from so many different countries there. And some of them would only come for a short time, and others might be there for quite a long time. And there are different types, and getting to know all the different ones. It was really a very interesting time.
When you came back to Wales, you had the idea of founding a Danish-style folk school in Wales.
Well,
and I think you also wanted to introduce that concept to Ireland at a later stage.
Yes, I would have rather liked to, only we never got round to that. We did try just to get some kind of a folk school, and we did run a rather embryo kind of a little one. But it wasn't on a very big scale or anything very important or full of great ideas or anything that way. But we did get quite a lot of young people that were interested, and still I have, until quite lately anyhow, I kept in touch with some of them, but of course it's a long time now since the time I was first over there.
And while you were in Wales, you became very involved with the Welsh nationalist movement,
Oh,
with
yes.
Plaid Cymru, for instance.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Oh yes, we did quite a lot, and my husband wrote a good many little pamphlets and things about it. I don't know if there are any of them with us now. Oh yes,
Well, we've got some of them here.
Yes, we've got those, of course. Yes, economic
Towards Welsh
and
freedom,
towards
for instance.
freedom. Yes, those ones.
And then there's this one, Can Wales
And
Support
Can Wales
Self-Government,
yes, that was
which
one.
you wrote jointly.
Yes, we wrote that jointly. That's right.
How involved were you in the day-to-day activity of Plaid Cymru and that movement in the 30s and 40s?
Oh, we were pretty active about it at that time. It would have been 30s and 40s, or I think that's a bit late. Perhaps it would have been a bit earlier than that. It's very hard to get one's brain sorted out about the dates of these things, It's not so easy. Is there anything here that give me a clue anywhere? Not a word. Here we are. First published 1939, revised 1947. No, yes, I hadn't revised that. Yes.
Well, how interested were you yourself in the self-government movement at that time?
I was very interested in it. We were both very interested in it, really. And, we worked quite a lot for it. Both those, you see, this was written by us both, of course, together. This what's the nervous thing? Oh, that's Education for Life. Yes, that's right. And I think that's.
And what kind of work did you do?
I don't know what you mean.
We
had a kind of a school in a way for young boys, and we used to give them lectures, classes and all that sort of thing, and various activities of different kinds. Gymnastics. My husband was very good at gymnastics, and he used to help them to do the gymnastics and show them how to do it and all that.
Was there much opposition within Wales at that time from ordinary Welsh people to the idea of separating from England and the rest of the United Kingdom? Or was there a very strong nationalistic movement?
No, I don't think exactly. Not so much when we were at it, anyway. I don't know. I wouldn't say that. I don't think there was a very strong. There were a few people like old D.J. Williams of Abergwine. He was a wonderful old man. People like that. They were very, very, very keen about Welsh self-government and all that kind of thing. But
Well, 40 years later on, do you still believe in the idea of self-government for Wales?
Oh, I do, of course, yes. I think that it would be much better than having it as kind of a milk and watery kind of thing that isn't either the one thing or the other. I do believe in it still. Yes, certainly I do.
Well, apart from being involved in writing political tracts and manifestos,
yes.
you also had quite a literary bent, and you began writing poetry at a very early age.
Oh, yes, I certainly began scribbling some sort of poetry at a very early age. But I don't think that there was anything very startling about it. I mean, it was more to please my mother, I think, than anything else, because she was very anxious. She was very pleased, anyhow, whenever I managed to write any poetry. So I think it was really her pleasure more than mine. But I was very glad, of course, to do it, too, because I enjoyed doing it myself. But,
well, you obviously turned out a prodigious amount of poetry in the early years, because some of it has been published, and there's lots more of it lying around in manuscript form
I
here
don't
and
know
there.
where the manuscript form is. I suppose it's somewhere, maybe up in the attic upstairs, I dare say, for all I know. I don't know where it is now, anyhow.
Will I let you in on a secret?
Well, I don't mind if you do.
There's a certain national teacher in the locality who shall remain nameless.
Oh, I think we'll keep him nameless, but I know what I mean.
Who has a considerable collection of your early manuscripts.
Holy Moses! How did he ever get hold of them? Well, that beats everything.
Now, your earliest published work is in this beautifully produced book called Middle Country.
Oh, that thing, yes.
Which was published
sometime. I don't know
sometime.
when.
Let's have a look and see when
This
exactly.
year, next year, sometime never.
1936.
Oh, was that it? I'm glad to be reminded of that note, but I didn't remember it at all.
What are the poems you can remember from that period, or do any of them still stand out in your mind?
Well, I suppose, I don't know. It's also long. I think I remember that Rain on the Wind. I do remember that in May Morning. Those are a couple that I do remember. Whitson, I don't remember. Oh, yes, that one was rather nice too, Whitson. But really, it's so long since I saw any of them that I can hardly recognise them now.
Well, it seems to fall into two particular categories. There's some very nice pastoral poetry there
yes.
in the beginning of that.
The early part.
In the early part of that book,
I've forgotten what's in it myself this minute.
And then at the
I
end...
used to like The Old Farmer, I know that.
Will you read The Old Farmer for us?
Oh, I don't think I can read the poetry very well. He walks his fields at spring's returning, fields that for 60 years he's trod, the dear familiar signs discerning of life renewed in tree and sod. No more with straight and youthful bearing he moves, but bowed with age and toil, yet through a deep-felt kinship sharing the vernal impulse of the soil. Lord, when he comes to heaven's portal, give him no alien crown of gold, but let him see thy spring immortal, crowning those fields he loved of old. That was my father. Yeah.
That poem obviously means a good
Yes.
deal to you.
Yes, it does indeed. It reminds me of him so much.
How do you remember your father?
Well, I remember him as a very active man and a man with a mind of his own, and very interested too in things about the old country sayings and that kind of thing, and the stories that people would be telling around the fireside at night and that kind of thing. Not that I think he was actually sitting on other people's firesides at night, because I don't think he was, but I mean that he was interested in all that kind of thing. He had a great feeling for the ordinary people and their life and the things that interested them. And he was very kind and good to animals too. I think all his animals he treated awfully well. He had a beautiful bay mare called Rose, and she was a beautiful horse. And we used to go out driving with her. She was a lovely animal. And then there was a funny little round, pudgy little pony called Mark Tapley. I called after the Mark Tapley, in the books. And he was as round as anything, and he used to go tearing along in the pony trap and almost bursting out through the shafts. Oh, we used to have great times in those days. And then, of course, there was Rose, who was a very beautiful big horse. And, oh yes, I think I mentioned this to you before. I'm not sure if perhaps it was to Helga I mentioned it. But one time I thought I was being very brave. I went off for a ride all on my own on Rose's back. And we got to the top of Corrail, you know where Corrail is. And we started to go down. And poor Rose, of course, she was a very noble horse in every way. but she found there was no strength in my arms holding her up, you see, going down this steep, steep hill. And I was trembling with terror the whole way down, for I was expecting her to fall any minute and drop me on the road. I'll never forget that, going down that hill from Corrail. I think it was nearly the death of me. But anyhow, I got down at the bottom alive anyway. That was the main thing. But the thing that printed itself on my mind, I can never forget it. Oh, and then of course there was Mark Tapley, as I say, this nice round little pudgy pony that used to take us to church on the Sundays. And well, there was all that kind of thing, you know, all the animals, we loved every one of them, of course, and they all had their own names and their own Kelly characters and their own things about themselves. Yeah. So it was a very happy kind of a life like that, you know, just right out in the country, and with nice, pleasant things all around you, people and animals and everything else. You know, we had a grand time, and indeed I think we all have a grand time still, don't we, Helga? In spite of everything.
Your father, Thomas Ffrench, was a member of that great Anglo-Irish landed family.
Oh yes, the Frenches.
The Frenches
yes,
of Monavale.
Frenches of Monavale, yes. He wasn't exactly one of the actual Monavale Frenches that were there, but he was related to them all. There was Atchison French was one. I don't think I ever saw any of them though. And there was a Miss French, I think, but I think she died a very, very long time ago now. I don't think I ever saw her. No, I don't think so.
Well, he came here to this house we're now in about the year 1870.
I think that was around the time, yes. I suppose it's in some of those books. Wait, no, not that one. Would it be in that? No, it wouldn't be in that either. Yes, but anyhow, it would have been somewhere around that time now, I think.
Well, we were talking about your poetry there a few moments ago, and I was saying that apart from the early pastoral poetry, and
yes,
that's a very fine poem which was inspired by your father, the poems in the later part of the collection are mostly sonnets. Now, were you attracted to the sonnet as a verse form as well?
I didn't think of it from that point of view, if you know what I mean. I mean, I wasn't saying to myself, I must write a sonnet. But the idea, I suppose, came into my head, and then I would write something or other that seemed to fit in with it. Well, of course, it's a very long time now since I wrote very much poetry. But this one I rather liked, The Hidden Battlefield. Not in the gilded panoply of war the greatest deeds are done, nor in the glare of public favour grows the tree that bore the laurel for the wreaths the immortals wear. The victor in his triumph, midst applause of multitudes, may know himself within to be a traitor to some sacred cause, and vile as those men brand with basest sin. But in the soul a battlefield is found, a lonely battlefield that no man sees. There victory with no mortal gold is crowned, and earns no praises, and no pageantries. Yet on that hidden field man wins a prize that shall not perish when earth's glory dies.
Can you remember when you wrote that?
Indeed I can't. I'm sorry. I wish I did, but I don't. I don't think there's anything here that will tell you either.
Or what it was that prompted those sentiments? Was it perhaps during the war years?
Well, it says not in the gilded panoply of war anyway, the greatest deeds are done. I don't know why I should particularly thought of that. Only I think I thought that the thing that happens within you is something that really means more to you than something that just you see from outside. That's the only thing I think that I can see in that connection.
I think perhaps one of the really nicest things you've written, Dr. Davies, are these letters, what you call these letters
yes,
to your godchildren.
Oh, I'm glad you like them. Yes. And I enjoyed writing them too, because I mean there were so many nice old things that I remembered and about the family and everything, and I liked to write them down when I had the chance. And
it is in effect a family history of the French family.
It is a kind of well, of course it doesn't take them all in, but yes, it is mainly a family history of the French family. That's quite true.
And the history of this house here.
And the history of this house, and coming in sideways, so to speak. Yes.
Which dates back to 1720, I think.
Yes, it's pretty. Yes, I can't remember which page it's in, but it's somewhere there too. Oh, I must have put an awful lot of work into that. I hadn't realised there was such a lot in it.
Pages and pages and
pages
of
horrible, horrible little writing.
Tiny handwriting. Going from 1944 right up to about 66 at least, or perhaps even later.
Gracious, yes. I hadn't taken it in really myself, but I see now. Of course, I must read it myself again.
How much of that can you remember now?
Well, I wouldn't remember it just. I mean, if you handed it to me into my hand, I wouldn't be able to tell you everything that was in it. Not by a long shot.
But there are descriptions.
Certain bits I'd be able to pick out, as if you said. Tell me something about something or other, or I don't know what. well, there's a bit about being a healthy open-air life, you're seeing about the district around Monavea and all that kind of thing. But that's sort of a little bit on its own. And then there are other bits about it. And then, of course, number 3, you see, upon my word, it's so long since I read it, I don't remember very much of it. Get the old glasses up. Oh yes, here we are. My father was not a demonstrative man, but when he spoke of Monavea and his childhood haunts in County Galway, there was something in his tone that I can never forget. The same note of tenderness and loving memory that came into my mother's voice when she spoke of her old home at Spawfield, something with the quality of eternity rather than of time in it. He used to revisit Monavea for many years after leaving the district, but eventually ceased to do so, owing to some slight which he thought Atchison Ffrench had put upon him on one occasion when he visited the house, the castle. Though in spite of the external coolness between them, I believe that at heart he kept his affection for his cousin to the end. One result of this estrangement was that my sister and I never visited Monavea as children or young girls, though we passed through the village a couple of times on our way to Galway. Usually, however, we went to Galway by another road. The only time I ever saw the house was on December the 14th, 1939, when with my mother and my husband I drove over from Bushy Park to the auction of the furniture and pictures there after Rosamond Ffrench's death. That was another Rosamond Ffrench, not my sister. Seeing it then, I could well understand the love those who knew Monavea had for it. It was such a spacious, gracious-looking house, with the red-berried evergreens against its walls, and the beautiful beech trees, and the beauty and peace of the ancient woods about it. Walking among those beautiful beech trees, one could understand the feeling behind the will, afterwards set aside as invalid, of its last owner, Kathleen Ffrench. When dying in far-off Harbin, she left Monavea to the Irish government upon certain conditions, one of which was that not a tree on the estate should ever be cut down. We brought home nothing from the auction except the small picture of Robert Percy Ffrench already mentioned, but looking back as we drove away I could still see the clustering trees of Monavea serene against the wintry sunset, and I treasure the picture of it which I carry in my memory, and the sound of its name as spoken by the countryman of whom we asked the way, and who answered, "Is it Monavea?" with a lovely rising inflection of his voice on the last syllable. At this point perhaps I should give my father's explanation of the different spellings of the family name. If I'm more boring, just stop me, because I might be going on forever and ever. In the Middle Ages, of course, there were many variants of the name, but some people have found it puzzling that in modern times one member of the family should spell it French with 2 F's, while his first cousin spelled it French with 1 F, and yet another cousin spelled it double small f French. This is my father's story. I do not know how much of it is fact and how much is legend. There was a Lord Ffrench mixed up in the promotion of a bank at Tuam, which went smash, or defaulted, and this was a capital offence at the time. Didn't know that. He disappeared, and some said that he shot himself, but others said that he did not, but that stones were found in his coffin when it was buried on the estate. Some members of the family, wishing to disclaim connection with the disgrace, started to write their name with 1 F. The Monavea Ffrenches, including my great-grandfather, Thomas Ffrench, and my grandfather, William, did so, but later on some of them took up the 2 F's again. My father himself and his branch of the family spelt it double F, R-E-N-C-H, but his first cousin James Ffrench of Strokestown spelt it F-R-E-N-C-H. I do not pretend to be able to give the correct spelling in every case for the different branches of the family. No, indeed I don't. I couldn't.
And all of that was written almost 40 years ago now, back in 1944.
I suppose so, yes, it must have been.
And there are pages and
pages
and
and
pages.
of weary pages, one after another. But I enjoyed writing it, because it was great fun and trying to pick up all the little bits and pieces of information, or misinformation, whichever it might be. I quite enjoyed writing it, and I'm glad I did it now, because I probably would never have done it if I hadn't happened to do it then. So I'm glad that I have it done anyway. I mean, there is that much in it. There's something there. It's not anything very much, I know, but it does give a kind of a background, and all these little pages too. Yes.
Did you, as you were growing up, then have a great feeling of history, of family pride?
Yes, well, I was very interested in the family, of course, and my father used to tell us a good deal about the family, you see, and there were various other French cousins and things, and, well, of course, there's a whole reels of stuff here anyway that I gathered from one bit and another, you see. I wrote it in sort of, you see, that's number 3 now, and then if that would go on a certain distance, then I'd start off somewhere else. It's 4 there, you see. But I'm very glad I did write it when I did, because if I hadn't, I probably would never, I mean, if I hadn't got down to it and started to write and make an effort to do something about it, I would never have really gotten half of it written.
And most of it would have been lost by now.
It would have been lost, sure enough. Somebody would probably have put it in the fire or something as likely as not. You never know what they do.
Tell me, Dr. Davies, did you see yourself as being a radical, or what we would call today a feminist in those early years?
No,
when
I never
you were
thought
involved?
about any of those things. I must say, no, it didn't bother me one way or the other. I mean, I wasn't sort of very enthusiastic about either suffragettes or anti-suffragettes or anything like that. I suppose I didn't have anything much to do with them. You see, my life didn't really bring me much into touch with people like that. I mean, I hadn't any great ideas about that at all, one way or the other, to tell the truth. I mean, I certainly wasn't engaged in any great feminist activities or anything. No, I suppose I was just not brought up in that kind of a way, to think of it from that particular angle, you know what I mean? No.
What were the things which were important to you as you grew up?
Well, my home, I suppose, most of all, my parents and my sister, and any other close relations, you know, like uncles and aunts and things like that. We had several of them. I mean, there were the Foxes were down there in Kilmore, you know, down that side, and then there were the various other relations round about and that kind of thing. It was, well, of course, all a different kind of a world at that time, you know what I mean. I don't know, life went on in a different kind of a way somehow. It was more simple and just near to the earth, and of course near to one's home too, and all the things that we were interested in, our animals and our dogs and our cats and all those kind of things, you know, and then we were rather lucky because the people nearby were very kind and used to borrow their donkeys, and Rosamond and my sister, that was, and myself used to go riding off to Arity and places all over on these donkeys and had great fun like that. And there was an awfully nice old priest, I don't know who on earth he was, but he used to come driving along in some high car, and when he'd see us he'd give a great yell and sometimes he'd give a scalp to the donkey. And we used to think that was great fun. And he did too, I think, poor man. And we had one donkey, I remember, poor Pat. And he was a very charming donkey, but the only thing was about him, if he ever went near a hawthorn bush, he always ran into the middle of it with you, which was a bit awkward when you got stuck in the branches. Oh, we had a grand time, really. We were awfully lucky. I think we were very lucky to have such a happy time as we did have. It was great. And everything was, I think, simpler in those days, you know, and not so much show and outside things. You had more pleasure in yourself and the things around you, the things you were used to. And we had relations, you see. We had the Foxes, my uncle and aunt, Mr. and Mrs. Fox over at Kilmore. They were there, and then there was a continual coming and going between those two houses. One family would walk up one night and spend the evening and go back home, and then another day some other lot of them would come up, and, you know, we had plenty of company that way. We weren't lonely. Oh, I think we had a very lucky life, really. Really.